So that being said, let's get started. Okay. So the movie Elise Shadows of a Woman, a Brazilian psychological crime drama as described by Netflix, is inspired by the real Elise Matsunaga, I'm sorry, case. The story centers on a woman whose marriage to a wealthy husband deteriorates through betrayal, control, humiliation, and escalating conflict, unfortunately ending in a homicide. So, spoiler, if you want to go watch it before we talk about it, I suggest you go do that. If you don't care, stay tuned. Make sure you like this video and follow me. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about the major events and how it relates to the real case. I do know that there is a documentary out on on this movie. Well, on the case itself, and then the movie came after it. So if I do a part two, it'll be most likely in response to me watching that. But I'm not really a documentary girl, so no promises there. But I felt compelled to talk about this, so let's just get into it. So one thing I really wanted to focus on first is that the difference between a cycle and a loop. A cycle brings you back with greater awareness while and the possibility of a different choice. That's what a cycle is. Now, a loop or a trauma loop to be specific, again, not clinical advice, I'm just sharing what I know, brings you back to the same wound wearing different choices. Y'all ever date the same person in a different font? It's like that. Okay. So that's the overall positioning that I have when it comes to this. So let's get into the movie because there is a bunch of patterns, and I'm somebody that's very systems oriented. So when I see a pattern, I focus on it immediately, and I wanted to point a few things out. So in the movie, how the movie essentially starts is that Elise is at the crime scene. She is going through the motions, and the movie eventually takes us back to where it all started. Elise is a prostitute in Brazil. She is blonde, blue eyed, uh, and her boyfriend turned husband, affectionately calls her Blondie. So that's another pattern in itself. He is of Japanese descent, so there are some like racial fetishes going on as well. Um, what else happens? Yeah, so we find that she works in this club called VIP class, where there are escorts, there are strippers, there are prostitutes, all galore, sex workers of all kinds, and they are moving through their motions of, building connections with their clientele. Uh, Elise thinks she meets this man who's in business with in a family business with um sales. I don't know, but it's popcorn, and they are multimillionaires. The popcorn that went platinum. There's so much going. I'm not laughing at this. I'm just like, there's so much going on in this movie. I'm trying to keep track of it. So essentially, the guy convinces her that he is going to leave his wife for her, and he is going to do it through admitting his wife to a psychological institution. That's the only way he's going to properly leave his wife. So there's that. The previous wife, we don't know how he met the previous wife, but as you go through the movie, me personally, I think it's safe to assume that she may have been a part of the VIP class because that's eventually how he also begins to cheat on Elise as well. And Elise also finds out that I'm not gonna be linear about things. There's gonna be a lot of spoilers, but yeah, she eventually finds out that he's gonna do the same thing to her a week from the time that she's meeting with her current replacement, pretty much. So The previous wife also had a daughter for the husband. The husband's name is Marcos. Um, Marcos, Elise told Marcos to made him promise that he wouldn't treat her like he did his ex-wife. Pretty much, he gaslit the ex-wife, made her feel like she was neurotic about all her complaints, especially when it was came down to giving birth to a child. The the husband Marcos did not want to go to the doctor to see why he was struggling with having kids, and he put all the blame on the wife as well as Elise over time. And a lot of gaslighting, a lot of psychological warfare was going on. And yeah, and it took 3 years for them to have their child. I don't know how long it took for the other thing, but same patterns are continuing here. Wealth and status become part of the romantic rescue family. Elise grows up in a very uh, rural area with her aunt, her mom, her cousins, as well as her stepfather. We find out through Elise's backstory that Elise's father was a cheater and he abandoned the family. Mom went and got a stepfather. Come to find out, a second husband who became the stepfather. Come to find out, the stepfather was even worse to her. Between the ages of 12 to 15, he escalated in physical and unconsensual acts with her, and she has been traumatized naturally. It's just what it is. And the child any of the cousins, we don't know if any of the cousins or the siblings in the family ever got affected by that abuse, or she was the only one. But anytime that he was around another female family member that was younger, she was instantly triggered. And there was always arguments, there was always a fight, to the point where she even took out a knife on one of the guys and whatnot, on that guy. And mom defended the husband, get out, we never want to see you again, blah blah blah. um Her aunt is the only one that seems to be uh the one that she gets along with and that genuinely wants to support her, but at the same time the aunt also enables the situation. And we'll get into that as we go along. So she comes from poverty for the most part. So she gets into prostitution. She thinks she can find a husband in the club. She does find a husband in the club, but not knowing that this type of behavior, this type of thought process, this type of history leaves you prone to abusers, right? So eventually, infidelity, humiliation, threats, and emotional destabilization starts. Um, he starts humiliating her in front of his friends. He starts cheating. He goes back to VIP class. He threatens her um, with taking their child away. And there's a lot of emotional destabilization, especially around the time that they're trying to conceive. Um, because she's taking hormones and all this different stuff because he refuses to take tests. But he's out cheating so much that, there's a lot of sexual health issues going on as well. Um, and he's also increasing isolation and dependence. So it's not said in the movie. It might have been said in the documentary, but again, I'm just going off the movie. It's not said in the movie that Elise, Elise has any access to her own provisions of any kind. Like she has access to his credit card, but does she have accounts and things of that of her own? It's not said. But from what I'm seeing here, it doesn't seem like it. She's fully dependent on him to the point where he starts going on these business trips for days at a time. He doesn't tell her when he's coming back, to the point where he's just like, "Oh, I'll let you know. Oh, my meeting running late. Oh, my flight got canceled. Don't wait up." So there's a lot going on. I'm trying my best not to put myself in this. That's me. Oh my god. So I'm trying to let me keep it professional. But y'all, you already know. In my head, I'm like, Anyway, so he also starts threatening her with psychological institutionalization, being used as a threat or a form of control to keep her from discovering that he's cheating and his infidelity. Eventually, she does come to find out the day that she finds out that he's cheating is the day that she finds out that she's pregnant. Like, literally, it's the argument, it's the confrontation, and then boom, she throws up, oh, you're pregnant. Mind you, it's a dramatization, but still, right? So I think there's like the baby's not even 1 years old yet at this time. So I think it's 3 years of them trying to conceive. And then she gives birth. And then a few months after that, the the big confrontation happens. Um to the point where he's even like not trusting of her. So she has his sister. Yeah, his sister comes to visit and hangs out with her. Sister's like, "Hey, let's go outside and go for a walk." She's like, "No, because Marcos is gonna come home. He's gonna want me home and whatnot." Marcos calls on the phone. He's like, "Where are you?" "I'm home." "Oh, I don't believe you." And he's like, "Well, I'm here with your sister." He's like, "Well, let me speak to her. Let me confirm with her." She's like, "Do I really have to?" He's like, "Yes, you have to." And she does it. She's like, "Hey, Marco." Like, and the sister's looking at her like, are y'all okay?" She's like, "No, I feel like I'm losing him, this and this and that." Elise confides in her a little bit and she's like, "Oh, it just won't happen. It's okay." But like again, it's a movie, I understand that. So but there's not really much being said or done. Like nobody's holding Marcos accountable except for Elise, right? Um There and this goes into the whole family social systems failing to interrupt this pattern because the family is very aware of how Marcos is and how Marcos behaves. There is this aspect of their life where they're into adrenaline seeking things. I don't remember the exact term for it, but essentially, excuse me, essen- ex- essentially there is. I wish there was a timer on this thing. I don't even know how long I've been on here. Um, Sorry, y'all. I'm losing my train of thought. Essentially, there is this time where they go hunting. She kills this like massive deer. She ends up like skinning, helping to skin it. Um, he has this huge weapons collection. Um, the night of their honeymoon, there's a gun being taken out, and they're having their honeymoon with the gun out. I don't think it's loaded, but yeah, like there's a lot going on here. And they get off on that pretty much. So it was at that point in the movie where I was like, okay, there's a lot more. There was even a point of where they got a pet snake, and even that made me think. I was like, people that own snakes have peculiar interests. Not to like come at anybody, shade, no, nothing like that. But I think there's something to be said about that being the hunting, the the power dynamics that involve hunting, um, the power dynamics that involves having a snake, things like that, and then having guns, and then using it during sexual activity is a lot to be said there. So it really triggered in my mind. I said, okay, this is not a normal relationship. There's a lot more intensity involved than the average relationship or the average relationship bounds, I guess you could say. So there was a key question here that I thought about, and I thought, you know, a lot of people will look at this and be like, oh, she should have left. It's like, no, I don't think that's the exact question. I think the better question is, what did leaving actually require in the reality of her life? Because leaving can also require not only just money, documents, legal counsel, evidence, emotional support, a safe space, outside relationships, enough psychological space to think, strategically and clearly, beyond the immediate crisis, thinking long term, for example, but also a lot of courage. I'm gonna let that sit. A lot of courage. If you ever think about where you've been in a tough situation and the courage that it took to get yourself out of it, you can see where Elise was in that predicament. And this is why cycles versus loops, having that distinction is very important. And we'll continue on as I'll explain more about that as we go on. But the main thing I wanted to point out was the sovereignty part, because a lot of, and this isn't me trying to victim blame or anything like that, because I think both are at fault here. And it's a very tragic situation. I think there's a sovereignty point because when you're so focused on being chosen by somebody powerful, is not the same thing as being in power. You're simply in proximity to it, but you are not instantly inheriting that, especially if the person doesn't allow you that type of access. Proximity does not always equal access. Access does not always equal proximity. And for a sovereign person, for a sovereign being, you need access, you need proximity, and you need knowledge. You also need courage too. And you need those are the main 4 points, I think. I think the biggest point here is that you need to understand the difference, specifically when money is involved, when resources are involved. And I also think there was this part of like, because we're all conditioned into this at some point in our lives, especially given the society that we're in. Marriage is not considered automatically safety either. Just because you're married to a wealthy millionaire, billionaire, it doesn't equal financial sovereignty either, especially if there's not proper documentation involved, like a prenup, and there's a lot of stigma on prenups and things like that. Being provided for is also not the same thing as having options. That freedom is in your options, your choices. If your choices are minimal, you still have a choice. But if you let somebody tell you you don't have a choice and you take that at face value, you're boxing yourself in an already built cage. My second point, cycles versus loop. A healthy cycle is a healthy cycle can look like experience, reflection, integration, different choices, and then it returns all over again. The experience encourages a reflection, the reflection encourages integration, it encourages a different choice, and then you go back again. Now, a loop, different. Instead of experience, there's a trigger. In Elise's case, she's triggered not only there's so many triggers actually. I'm trying to think which one was the one that really, really set her off. Okay. She Marcos first threatens her to take the child away. So she goes to her family and she tells her aunt. Her aunt is like, don't try to divorce the man, stay in the marriage. What are you gonna do when you leave him, et cetera, et cetera. So that triggers her because she's like, I'll never leave my child alone. I'm not gonna abandon her because she was abandoned by her father. And her mother didn't make the best choices for her after that. So she didn't want that loop to continue. And at this point of view, you can see her behaving in a what I call a generational curse breaker way. You see the issue, you see the problem, and you want to prevent it, right? So she's at her aunt's house. She has her nanny with her. The nanny's playing with her baby on the grass. She steps away to get on the phone. Her lawyer calls her and tells her, "Hey, it's most likely." again, most likely that the court will grant Marco's custody because you have he comes from a wealthy family. Excuse me, y'all, I don't know why I'm burping. He comes from a wealthy family and you have a history of prostitution off the rip. And in my head, I'm like, BS, right? The the counselor is like, I mean, the legal counsel is well, infidelity doesn't affect or adultery doesn't affect child custody. And Elise was like, "Well, he's cheated on me. I have the proof. I sent a private investigator, sent a he takes the private investigator, saw them at the same restaurant, saw them get buy the same car that he bought me, et cetera, et cetera." Like, yeah, infidelity doesn't change custody, at least in Brazil, in that part of Brazil. I don't know now. This was years ago, but that's what the movie was saying. So she's on the phone, right? She's hearing that she's being blocked off from her goal, right? Of protecting her child. She can't even fully process that before she sees her stepfather, who last time she saw was years ago, and she had threatened with a knife because he was provoking her, playing with her child. And the nanny doesn't know to keep him away from her. So she spazzes, she drops her phone, she runs at him and starts whopping on him, right? And the family's screaming, breaking it up, whatnot, whatnot. And she's like, get in the car, whatever, we're leaving. She doesn't have time to process any of this. She's immediately triggered. So not only is she triggered by her past with her father, she's triggered by her present, by her stepfather, and she's triggered in the future by her future ex-husband. Y'all see the pattern, right? So that is the trigger. The familiar reaction of it all is being like you don't have a choice and you just have to sit with it. The familiar consequence is that the men in her life always get their way and she has no way of protecting herself. There's this temporary reset, which is her heading back home. Her aunt even asks her, which is this is all happening in the movie at least, the day that she's about to, unknowing to her, pop off on him. And no pun intended. But her aunt is like, "Are you sure you need to sleep over? Are you sure you don't want to sleep over?" And she's like, "No, it'll be all right." And she's like, aunt is starting to feel kind of way. She might have a little intuition going on, like something that ain't right. She's like, "No, it'll be all right." Come to find out, they took a plane all the way to the aunt's house. So I don't know how far it is. But the plane was late. Marcos was gonna go pick them up at the airport. Marcos got an attitude because he had to go stop and go pick up his family at the airport. So they're in the elevator and they're having attitude. They're both going bickering back and forth. The, Elise sends the nanny home and the same trigger, they start arguing again and the trigger continues and the cycle continues. I mean, and the loop continues. So that's the difference. And I want to emphasize something that repetition is not the problem here. A lot of things repeat. Seasons, your menstrual phases, as we talk about in cyclical living for sovereign Sundays. The moon repeats, school years repeats, your birthdays repeats, Sundays repeat. There are a lot of things that are repetitive, and it does not always mean something terrible. Okay. But I think a useful question would be when I return to this place, am I returning with new information? Elise has new information, but where if Elise was able to get additional support, somebody around her could have been like, go get a second opinion or stay the night at your aunt's house where you could think a little bit clearly. But because her stepfather's around, it's a little hard to do that. So I get it. She's also being threatened with institutional psychological institutional. Is that what I'm trying to say? Basically, she's been threatened with being put away. And I don't even think and it's fair to say that she would have taken any type of therapeutic counsel in the first place because she's being threatened with it and she sees how the ex-wife was treated to get in that position. But because she wanted to be saved so badly, she wanted to be loved and supported so badly, she didn't think it would happen to her. She moved in this situation as if she was the exception to the rule, which is very dangerous. And when it comes to this new information, this repetition that Elise was moving through wasn't promoting her freedom at all. It was narrowing her available choices. The more she felt boxed in, the more lethal she was getting, the more she was about to have a mental breakdown. So let's move on to anger versus strategy. There were a lot of times in the movie where Elise blew up and she was justified in it. I really want to say she was utterly justified. She had every right to be pissed, every right to pull out. She had every right to go ham and protect her child. She had every right to speak up for herself. She had every right, every right. But just because you're justified in your anger does not always mean that every action produced by that anger protects you. I'm going to say it again. Just because you're justified in your anger does not mean that every action produced by that anger protects you. Your feelings deserve somewhere to go. They do not deserve automatic control of the steering wheel of whatever situation you're in. And regardless of whatever you may think as you watch this movie about their marriage, the killing of Marcos catastrophe. I can't even say this word. Catastrophic, catastrophically. There we go. Altered Elisa's future, where she was able to even communicate with a attorney. She was able to hire a private investigator. You know, um, she was still able to be in communication with her sister in law and her aunt. You know, she was still able to have access to her child for as long and as often as she wants. She was able to have help through the nanny. All of that went down to zero because of the actions of that night. The options around the divorce, the custody, finances, exposure, even escape, because it can seem very daunting, like, oh, you don't have any choices, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I say that from personal experience, from somebody who's left multiple um, unsafe situations, right? Um, I think the sovereignty question would be, what protects this future version of me who still needs these choices? You have to be strategic, because is it better for you to live your life without any freedom, without any choices, and get your revenge on this person? Or is it better for you to live your best life and protect yourself as best as possible? I think overall, the best choice is the choice that keeps you the safest, right? Um, these are the possible strategic responses that could have happened if she had the support that she needed, if she was able to think beyond her current crises. So she was already doing some of these things. So I will give her props for that. Documenting, she was doing that. She was asking questions, but she also should ask again. Keep asking. I think just like how in school where your teachers will tell you, "Oh, there's no such thing as a dumb question." Keep that philosophy. Keep asking. And the other side of that is if you have to ask, you already know there's an answer. For example, Elise made Marco swear up and down that he would not treat her like the ex-wife and institutionalize her. If you have to make somebody promise, swear, and cross themselves to God about how they won't do a certain thing or will do a certain thing, that is your indicator that they are and will and have the absolute audacity to treat you like that. You are not the exception to the rule. The fact that you're even questioning it is a signal of anxiety in itself, personally. If I know that I have to question something and I'm asking a whole bunch of questions, I know to think back and say, hey, there's some anxiety here, but I learned through my own experiences through the hard way. So I think that's something that Elise could have definitely utilized at that time if she had that support. Preserve that evidence, get another opinion, as I said before, quietly build your resources. I wish, which is another reason why I'm tempted to go watch the documentary. I really want to know if Elise went and got her separate bank accounts. I really want to know. I really want to know what type of lifestyle she was living aside because the movie made her very much a housewife, and an isolated housewife at that. And the color grading of the movie just made it seem like she was always in a dark space all the time. And that was obviously symbolic and things like that. I get that. I really want to know if she had that separate account because as an African woman, in my culture, we're always taught that the woman should have her own. Yes, you can marry rich, you can do that, but make sure you always have a little something on the side. And that part of me is like, I need to know if you just wasn't built spending racks on that man card and you was taking a little something, put it in your little I just need to know if something like that was going on. Because there was a couple scenes in the movie where she was packing and she had money from a safe and whatnot. So, but I don't know if it was really hers or she was just taking whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, and I want to know if there was a prenup involved and all that. So that's another reason why I'm tempted. But hey, um, yeah, consult people outside of the system. You are trapped inside. I've said that already. Like she had to like expand her resources outside of that. Make an exit plan more important than winning the argument. There were times that she was trying not to argue with Marcos, and she's like, "I don't want to argue with you," and he provoked her, of course, and she was triggered. There was this one point where he came from a trip and he came out the shower and he was immediately wanted to um get involved with her. And she wasn't in the mood. And she said, I'm not trying to fight with you. And he's like, oh, well, when I met you in that club, you were able to service men all day, all night. Now that I'm your husband, you can't do it now. Mind you, this is almost 3, 4 years into their marriage. Like, he's like, I'll pay you for it. And he goes and gets bands of money. And he's like, yeah, you want 100, 200, 300, 400. He's throwing it in her face. He's like, yeah. I give it to you all. He's like, I'm not your prostitute. He's like, you're still my whore. Say, no, your whore is that girl in the street. Your whore is still in that club. I'm your wife. He's like, you're crazy. And he starts gaslighting her. He's like, the way I feel right now, I don't think you're even safe to have our child in your custody or something like that. And it's like, trigger, 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 trigger. And that's what he does. He makes them feel so unstable that they feel so off, I guess you could say. So lost, I mean. Um, so yeah. So I want to stop really quickly, take a sip, and do a quick commercial break if you made it this far. Um, I have new social media platforms. One is called Rain Low, Reignloh. It is a mix between Sovereign and my name, Jalloh. I talk about adornments on there, fashion, lifestyle, hair, skincare, things like that. It's just a place for me to talk about my hobbies, the material aspects of life. It's just something for me to express myself through there. So definitely follow me there on all platforms. I literally just made the TikTok version of it yesterday night. I did a little my handbag rotation for the summer. Real cutesy, go support. Um yeah, and I'm just compartmentalizing um some of my like hobbies and like niches and stuff like that a little bit better. So that way I don't feel boxed into one social media profile. And that way I'm also not confusing y'all, my audience, because I know it could be a little odd where I'm talking about a lot of deep topics and then suddenly it's like, oh, look at this handbag I just got. I'm a girly girl. I don't know what to tell you. So I wanted to make space for all the facets of me, and that's just another space for that. So definitely follow that. Make sure you're liking and subscribing because I have a lot more in store for us coming down the line. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't want to say too much. Okay. All right. So yeah, the keep asking questions part is really important. I wanted to emphasize that a little bit more. One authority's answer is not always the reality. I've recently, very recently, and we'll talk about this in another video about why I've been gone and all the different things. Like it's coming down the pipe. But sometimes it's incomplete information. Sometimes it's institutional habit of them telling you what isn't going to work or what isn't possible. Um, Sometimes it's just misinformation. Sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes it's self protection. And sometimes it's simply somebody being just damn wrong. Okay. Just utterly, utterly off base. Um, s- Sovereignty includes verification. If somebody tells you no, you need to go get three other no's for it to be considered true. And I know that sounds very exhausting. I know that sounds very exhausting. And it's going to make you look or feel like, oh, I'm doing the most. Yes. If you're going to get what you need out of this life and get through all this bureaucratic tape and move through all these redlining issues that are going on in whatever field, whatever demographic you're in, because somehow, some way, somebody's always getting the short end of the stick. Especially if you're disenfranchised, especially if you're marginalized, especially if there's some sort of imbalance or power. What's the word? Power dynamic going on. You need verification and you need to back that up with preserving your documentation as well. Here's an example of an experience that I had a few years ago where my sister was being mistreated by one of her basketball coaches. Um, and he took um he took the punishment that he had given her for whatever she had done a little too far. And none of the adults were keeping him accountable for it. And she was suffering because she wasn't able to maintain her status on the team. So I had to step in and we had a meeting and we were all I was hearing everybody's point of view and whatnot and whatnot. And my sister was very upset. And long story short, she got emotional and I had to tell her to calm down and let me handle it. And I did. The issue got resolved, handled it. But after we got off the phone, I had to tell my sister straight up. I said, listen, you have every right to feel the way you need to feel. However, you cannot afford to be emotional in front of these people. And I know that sounds harsh and everything, but I'm telling you, the reason that they didn't take you seriously in this meeting is because you were very emotional. And it's sad, it's messed up, but it's so true. You can have your fit, you can cry, you can break something as much as you want outside of this room. But when you're in this room, you need to be strategic about how you're going to get what you want. You need to be versatile, you need to be adaptable. And most of all, you need to listen. Because when somebody tries to gaslight you, when somebody tries to mistreat you, when somebody tries to spin the story, you need to keep your facts and your emotions in check so you can get the outcome that you're seeking. Because the only reason I got involved is because you weren't maintaining your emotional uh reactions. And that's fine. You're in high school, like whatever. I'm not expecting too much. I get it. But this is a lesson you're going to have to learn if you're going to be productive in this society and get what you need and live a good life. Especially as black women. Especially us. Us. A whole us. We don't get the privileges of boohoo and crying, unfortunately, in the spaces. And yes, if y'all were wondering if the coach was, yes, yes. And there's a word for it where I can't remember it right now, where even people of our own people enable the situation. I think it's institutional institutional competence. No, not competence. If I remember it, I'll put it in the description or whatnot. But if even your own people could get you set up in it, because they're just cogs in the wheel. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be the one to be mindful of your goal, not trying to win the argument. Because my sister was in that room trying to win the argument with that coach. Mind you, they arguing right in front of me. I'm like, you don't have no shame, you know? I'm right in front of you, you know. But it got handled. She was able to be in her games. She graduated just fine. Cool beans. Because and I also was a teacher at that time, so I knew what was going on. I knew how to handle the situation. But the thing is, the main thing that I wanted to connect the parallel to Elise and sovereignty and this whole thing is that the only person that's going to get you, that's going to get in your way if you allow it, is you. Nobody else has the power to get in your way. These systems, these structures are around to maintain what is it, organization, balance, all these things, right? They're not perfect systems. But if you say you're going to get something that you want, you have to have a hold on your emotions. You have to have proper coping skills. You have to be reflective. You have to have some self-awareness. And most of all, you have to want to do better for yourself, not anybody else, even your child, because that was not enough. And unfortunately, it's a hard pill to swallow. And I'm going to tell you, having the child and wanting to protect the child was not enough to stop what happened. Now the child has lost both parents. Actually, two children have lost both parents. If we're talking about the half sister that the baby has, the dad is gone. One mom is institutionalized. The other one is in the jailhouse. Who's the winner? You can't base your why on somebody else because it's never going to work. Your children are not enough to get you out of the trouble that you put yourself into, because the system is going to take legal custody of them. Well, in this case, I think Marcos's family ended up taking legal custody of the daughter. So even Auntie didn't even get a chance to be around the little girl. And it's probably for better because Auntie is close to the abusive stepdad. So again, who's the winner? So let's tap into the counseling lens of it all. Again, I'm a student. This is not clinical advice. I'm just seeing it from a student point of view, holistic health, behavioral health. as well as education, all my background, and then a media uh, lens as well because I have experience in that as well. So overall, if somebody with that history were sitting across from me, my first question wouldn't be, why didn't you leave? My first question would be, I would be asking, what did that mean in the reality of their life? And I said this earlier, and it reminded me of the Wizard Liz, if y'all are familiar with that content creator. I don't follow her content other than what I've heard about her legal battle with her ex-husband or ex-fiance, I'm not sure, her ex-partner and the child. She's also not a citizen as well. So there's a lot going on with custody to the point where the last time that I left off on the whole saga situation was that she had decided to wash her hands of the situation and said, "Baby, you want the baby? I'm not fighting you no more. You keep the baby because you're clearly using the baby against me to hurt me. You don't really care for this baby. So have your custody." And there was a lot, and there probably still is. There is a lot of discourse on that. And fair, as someone who's also a product of divorce, um, my father got full custody, and hella grateful for that. Don't get me wrong, hella grateful for that because Lord knows who I would have been. But I can say that there's no right or there's no perfect way to go about this type of thing. I think that if you're already being weaponized, if you're already being having psychiatric care and counseling being weaponized against you, this mistrust of any type of mental health authority would make anybody be fearful of them. And I think that I'm not going to bother even trying to diagnose Marcos as any type of psycho anything. But I think the observable dynamics of coercion and humiliation, threats, infidelity, manipulation, control, power imbalance, as well as family system reinforcements are very telling here. I think because in Marcos's background, we find out because Elise also starts triggering him too. And she's telling him, like, oh, we already know that you the what did she call him? You're the loser of the family, the sloth of the family, something like that. And yes, it has English dub over it, so you don't have to worry about the Portuguese language if you're not fluent in it. But I think she said sloth or something like that. And she was like, everybody knows your brother's the one that's really the hardworking in the family. It's your father's company. First of all, it's not your company. And we already know you just slack off and you just spend the family's money, bills, uh, spend the money and like, increase the bills and whatnot. And then she's like, your dad don't love you or something like that. She was like, because the dad is emotionally distant. He hardly talks. And when he does talk, he's always judgmental. Like the day of their wedding, he's like, "When y'all having kids?" And he's like, mind you, they already got a grandkid, right? Oh, well, what else is your use? Like he's like, there's nothing else good for you. Mind you, it's only her and her aunt at the wedding. The rest of the family is the Matsunaga family. And then the family friends of Marcos and whatnot. Um, and the best friend also has this like VIP class situation where he knows she's a prostitute and whatnot. But that's not all that important. But um, the family is very aware of how Marcos behaves, even though in the movie that's not very centered. But they know because Elise knows. But again, nobody says anything because when you look at the patriarch of the family, everybody handles their struggles separately. You know, so I think a few questions that I would ask if Elise was sitting right in front of me and I was even just advice, not even counseling, but even as advice, just genuine friendly advice. If I was the sister in law, for example, I would say, What did she believe would happen if she left? And we would explore that. What resources did she actually control? And we would explore that because I promise you, there's a whole lot more than you think. And maybe some pettiness and an end goal will carry you far if you know how to use it correctly. Okay. And then who could she trust without being redirected back into the marriage? And through that movie, you could tell that there wasn't anybody around except for maybe the ex friend that she had from the VIP class. But I can understand why she wouldn't have trusted her. Even though the friend didn't do anything, they just happened to see each other years after the fact. But the friend assured her, like, no, nobody knows where we met each other from or anything like that. But I feel like that could have been a person, a potential person, depending on, how things continued. Um, what did motherhood change about her perception of risk? I think that one would be a loaded question because that would tap into her mother wound and her father wound. It'll probably take several conversations to figure that out for her. And then she's going to have to journal a lot about that and reflect a lot on that. What would a safe strategic exit have required months earlier? Because the whole point is to get you out safe and sound with the baby. What would that have looked like ideally? And then when we work with the ideal scenario, when pivots need to happen, we can go from there. I also wanted to talk about the symbolism of the night of the confrontation, of the big confrontation, where Marcos unfortunately gets KO'd. Um, After, mind you, she's like arguing, they're going back and forth, yo daddy this and that, yo mama this and that, yo da, da, da. They going back and forth and whatnot. Um Marcos goes and get the pizza that was coming because I'm about ordering cold pizza or whatever. Y'all watch the movie and see. And she puts up the video of Marcos cheating with the woman on the TV. And that's kind of what like triggers the argument again. And Elise, for whatever reason, gets more and more angry and Marco slaps her. Yeah, after Marco slaps her, yeah, that's what happened. I'm like, that would make anybody even more hostile. Marco slaps the mess out of her. She gets even more angry. She goes to the drawer, gets that gun. Why that gun was separate from all the other guns in the actual closet of the big drawer, I don't know. But that's how the movie depicted it. And she rounds like the kitchen uh entryway that goes into the living room, and she points the gun at him, and then she cocks it. Sorry if y'all hear that beeping, that's my neighbor. Um, and she cocks it, and he's like, "You don't got the guts." Blah blah. Blah. Mind you, this little thing was used in other activities in play. Okay, so he wasn't taking her serious at all, and Lord knows what he did because that he's a big dude compared to her too. So what that would have been like even if he did. So she cocks the gun and says, "Yeah, you this and that," and they're going back and forth. They're going back and forth, and then pow, right in the head, and he's down for the count. And the part that gets me, and I swear it was low key kind of funny, even though it's not funny, but it's low key kind of funny. After she did it, she like picks up the phone to call the police on herself. Then she hangs up. Then she looks at him again, and then she turns off the light and turns around. And I thought that was I have a dark sense of humor. I'm sorry, y'all. But I just thought that was so funny. Because how you gonna turn off the light like that's gonna make it feel any better? But it was so symbolic though, because I think it's really cool how symbolic that was. It's like, oh, like that was the only control she had at that moment to turn off the light. Out of the entire as something as simple and small, that was the only control she could muster at that time. And I thought that was so interesting how the directors did that or how the actress did that. Crazy to me. I literally I see the scene in my mind. I'm just like, go turn the right. So mind you, this is like after midnight when all of this goes down, right? The baby sleep, The nanny's gone. Around 7 something, she decides that she is going to um get rid of the body, and she's dragging, right? And dragging him around into the room. And then she gets the blade and starts chopping, right? And it's very gruesome. It's a very gruesome scene. So if you're queasy, be mindful. Um, I also think that's kind of like symbolic of her getting her power back because she she there was no other way, at least at that time. I couldn't even think of another way of doing it. But and I'm not even gonna get into that here on the internet, because that's just not appropriate. But that was another way I think of her also gaining control of the situation because she felt like him being this big thing, big person, she was able to minimize him in this way. And it's really crazy. Not crazy, that's not the right word, but it's really interesting to say, to see how the movie depicted the power dynamics still being effective somebody who is now deceased. So I thought that was really interesting to say. Um, yeah. So my second to last point is that, of course, and what I've been mentioning earlier is the children. The children and the downstream consequences of this entire situation. Adults can believe that they are fighting each other as much as they want, while the children are the ones inheriting the consequences. As someone who's a product of divorce and has multiple step parents, I know this a little too well, right? Um, I think accountability can be an act of protection for everybody downstream. That's just straight off the board. Accountability, self, and awareness, two things that are needed in any community, in any community ecosystem. You need accountability, you need self awareness in order for that community to thrive. And if it's not there, it is severely lacking, and there are many, and it encourages more curses, more family generational curses over time. And then it also breeds more family generational curse enforcers. Because if you're not helping to solve the issue, you're definitely encouraging it. It is what it is. When families excuse destructive behavior because somebody is wealthy, successful, charming, important, or that's just how he is. That's just Marco. That's just how he is. They help preserve the conditions that allow the pattern to continue, which is what I was just saying. The children in this story lose the stability in multiple directions. Yeah, both children, I assume. We don't even know what happened to the other daughter, where she went. I'm gonna assume she went back with Marcos's family. I can only assume that, but we don't see her at all in the movie. Um, but again, another reason why I'm tempted to watch it because there's so many unanswered questions I have here. Um, yeah, so the children end up going to stay with the grandparents, I assume, right? Naturally. Um, and then the grandparents are also grieving. And then whenever you see the child, you're also like remembering the situation, you know? It's really troubling. It really is a troubling thing because this is the part of the situation that's tragic beyond the marriage itself, you know? And even at the end of the movie, the credits say that, Elise never got to see or meet her child again, even in photos. But she was able to get, what did she get? Made her do 16 years, but because she did a confession, she got 10 years with parole or something like that. And then the family took away her last name from the baby's name. So she had zero access to her. And I don't know how Brazilian laws work. I don't know if the last name has that much prominence and like how you can engage with minors and things like that, or especially of your own children. But Apparently that's what was said, and that's what and she never got to, like, be with the child, see the child again. And I wonder, part of me also is interested to see, and I'm sure I could research this, but Imma leave them people alone. Um, it's interesting to see if the next generation overall would become generational curse breakers or generational curse enablers, depending on their personal dispositions and then how they were raised, so on and so forth, right? Um, so yeah, my last point, if you made it to the end, a cycle gives you another turn. A loop gives you the same wound. Sovereignty is learning to recognize which one is the one that you are while you still have choices. I don't think breaking a loop should always be dramatic. Sometimes it's about asking one more question, looking up one more thing, giving yourself time before you make the decision, getting another opinion, keeping your documents, reviewing your documents, saving that money, telling somebody what happened and how you feel and asking for help, leaving quietly and saying, "Hey, if you are not directly involved in this situation, let me go. I'm not going to tell you about it." You know, not winning the argument, letting the win be removing yourself from the conflict itself. You define the win, right? Not taking the bait and choosing your future over the satisfaction of reacting today. That was a heavy one. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate you. This was a very interesting, very tragic, very sad movie to watch, but very interesting in a lot of levels. And I hope I was able to clearly articulate them today. That being said, if you enjoyed this or have any commentary you would like to add, by all means, let me know down below. Make sure you hit the like and share this with somebody that you think would find this interesting. And yeah, I'll probably have more commentary coming down the line of other things too. And let me know if y'all want a part two, because if I get more encouragement for the part two, then I'll definitely watch that documentary. Just not a documentary girl, but I have so many unsaid questions, unanswered questions that, my curiosity might pull me in. So yeah. That being said, make sure you follow me at Jalloh Reborn on all platforms. Make sure you are subscribed to the Retired Elder Daughter if you are watching on Substack. And make sure you're subscribed. Okay. Not just following, subscribe. Because Substack be doing a little thing. If you subscribe, you don't get the following thing notification. But then if you following, you don't get the subscribe. Do the thing. Do both. Okay. And then yeah, Rain Low, REIGNLOH on all platforms if you want to see the whole lifestyle, cutesy chill girl aesthetic that I be doing. Okay. All right. Until next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.